Welcome, friend. Take a slow breath and let your shoulders soften. Tonight, we walk together through ancient pathways where stillness speaks and silence teaches. These are stories carried across centuries by those who learned to listen deeply, who found that wisdom arrives not through striving but through gentle awareness of what already is. The world you inhabit during waking hours may feel rushed and demanding, but here in this quiet space, there is nowhere to go and nothing to become. Simply rest as you are, breathing naturally, allowing each word to wash over you like water flowing over smooth stones. Let us begin where all true journeys begin, in the spacious now. In a forest monastery nestled among cedar trees, so ancient their roots remembered songs no living voice could sing, there lived a young monk who struggled terribly with his meditation practice. Each morning before dawn, he would take his place in the meditation hall, arranging his robes with careful precision, settling his body into the prescribed posture, and preparing his mind for the stillness his teachers described with such reverence. But stillness would not come. The moment he closed his eyes, his thoughts would explode like startled birds taking flight. Memories of his childhood home, worries about his progress, judgments about his inability to concentrate. Each thought spawning 10 more until his mind felt like a marketplace at midday, crowded and chaotic and impossibly loud. Night after night, he would leave the meditation hall feeling defeated, certain that he was failing at the very foundation of the path he had chosen. His fellow monks seemed to sit in such perfect serenity, their faces calm as mountain lakes, while he wrestled with the storm inside his own skull. One evening, as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began their patient vigil, he found his teacher sitting by the monastery pond. The old monk was simply watching the water, his presence as still as the stones around him. "Teacher," the young monk said, his voice heavy with frustration, "I cannot meditate. My mind refuses to be quiet. I have tried everything you taught me, counting breaths, following sensations, observing thoughts without attachment, but nothing works. Perhaps I am not suited for this path." The teacher said nothing for a long moment, his eyes remaining on the pond's surface. Then, without looking at his student, he asked a simple question. "Do you see this water?" "Yes, teacher." "Is it moving or still?" The young monk looked carefully. The surface appeared calm, reflecting the emerging stars with perfect clarity. "It is still," he answered. "Look deeper," the teacher suggested. The young monk leaned forward, peering into the dark water. After a moment, he could see tiny movements, almost imperceptible. Small insects skating across the surface, a fish turning in the depths, ripples from falling leaves spreading outward in delicate rings. The water was never truly still at all. It was always moving, always alive with countless small motions. "You see," the teacher said gently, "the pond appears still because you were looking at it from a distance. But stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the spaciousness that holds all movement with equal grace. Your mind is like this water. It will always have ripples, always have fish swimming in its depths, always have insects dancing on its surface. This is its nature. Meditation is not about forcing the water to stop moving. It is about becoming the vast awareness that can hold the movement without being disturbed by it." The young monk felt something shift inside him, like a door he did not know existed suddenly opening to reveal a larger room. He had been fighting against his mind's natural activity, trying to force it into an impossible stillness, when all along he needed only to observe it with the same patient spaciousness his teacher brought to watching the pond. That night, when he returned to his meditation cushion, his thoughts still arose in their usual turbulent fashion. But now he did not struggle against them. He simply noticed them, the way one might notice clouds passing through a vast sky. And in that noticing, he discovered the stillness he had been seeking was already present, had always been present, waiting underneath his efforts to create it. The Buddha once walked this earth, and everywhere he went, people asked him questions. They wanted to know about God and the soul, about heaven and hell, about the nature of reality and the purpose of existence. The Buddha would sometimes answer these questions, but more often, he would tell a story or ask a question in return, gently redirecting attention toward direct experience rather than abstract speculation. One afternoon, As he rested beneath a Bodhi tree, a scholar approached him. The man had spent decades studying sacred texts, memorizing thousands of verses, debating with other learned men about the subtlest points of doctrine. He bowed respectfully before the Buddha and said, "Venerable One, I have heard of your wisdom and have come seeking answers to the questions that have troubled me all my life." The Buddha smiled and gestured for the man to sit beside him. "Ask what you wish," he said. The scholar cleared his throat and began. "First, I would like to know whether the universe is eternal or created in time. Second, I wish to understand whether the universe is finite or infinite. Third, I need to know whether the soul is the same as the body or different from it. Fourth, I must discover whether an enlightened one exists after death or ceases to exist. These questions have occupied the greatest minds for generations, and I have come to you hoping for definitive answers." The Buddha listened patiently, his face showing neither approval nor disapproval. When the scholar finished speaking, the Buddha was silent for a long moment, simply breathing, his eyes resting on the play of light through leaves overhead. Finally, he spoke. "Suppose a man were shot with a poisoned arrow. His friends and family rush to find a surgeon to remove the arrow and treat the wound. But the wounded man stops them and says, 'Wait, before you pull out this arrow, I must know who shot it. Was he tall or short? From which family does he come? What type of wood is the arrow made from? What feathers guide its flight? What poison coats its tip? I will not allow the arrow to be removed until I have answers to all these questions." The Buddha paused, letting the image settle in the scholar's mind. "Tell me, would such a man be acting wisely?" The scholar frowned. "Of course not. He would die before getting his answers. The important thing is to remove the arrow and treat the wound, not to satisfy curiosity about irrelevant details." The Buddha nodded. "Just so. You have been shot with the arrow of birth, old age, sickness, and death. The arrow of suffering is embedded in your heart right now. I offer to show you how to remove it, how to end your suffering in this very life. But you stop me with questions about whether the universe is eternal or finite, whether the soul is the same as the body or different, whether an enlightened one exists after death or ceases to exist. These questions are like asking about the height of the archer while the poison spreads through your veins. Whether the universe is eternal or created, you still experience suffering. Whether the universe is finite or infinite, you still grow old and face death. Whether the soul is the same as the body or different, you still feel pain and loss and fear. I teach one thing and one thing only," the Buddha continued, his voice soft but clear as a temple bell. "Suffering and the end of suffering. Come, let us remove the arrow together. The other questions can wait, or they may dissolve entirely once you are free from pain." The scholar sat in silence, and as he sat, something remarkable happened. All the questions that had seemed so urgent, so essential, so worthy of a lifetime's investigation, simply fell away like leaves from an autumn tree. What remained was direct awareness of his own breathing, the feeling of earth beneath him, the sound of wind in branches above. For the first time in decades, he was not thinking about life. He was simply living it. High in the mountains where eagles built their nests and snow remained even through summer months, there stood a tiny hermitage. Here lived a monk who had chosen absolute solitude, withdrawing from all human contact to pursue enlightenment through uninterrupted meditation and contemplation. Years passed in this way. The monk would rise before dawn, sit in meditation through the morning, tend his small garden in the afternoon, study sacred texts in the evening, and sleep briefly before beginning again. He spoke to no one, saw no one, heard no human voice but his own occasional prayers and chants. His progress seemed remarkable. He could sit motionless for hours, his mind clear and calm. He experienced states of profound peace and expansive awareness. He felt certain that he was approaching the final breakthrough that would liberate him completely from suffering and delusion. One autumn evening, as the first snow began to fall, he heard an unexpected sound. Footsteps on the mountain path, then a knock at his door. Irritation arose immediately. He had chosen this place specifically because visitors could not easily reach it. Who would disturb his practice at this hour, in this weather? He opened the door to find an old woman, bent with age, wrapped in threadbare clothes, shivering with cold. Her feet were bare and bleeding from the rocky path. Her face showed the weathering of a hard life lived without shelter or security. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I am lost. I saw smoke from your chimney. Might I rest here until morning? I will leave at first light and trouble you no further." The monk felt his carefully cultivated peace fracturing like ice under sudden weight. All his years of solitary practice seemed to crash down around him. He had achieved such clarity, such inner stillness, and now this inconvenient old woman was threatening to undo everything. Several emotions moved through him in quick succession. Annoyance at the interruption, resentment at her poor planning that led to her predicament, anxiety about how her presence would affect his meditation schedule, irritation that she had found his hermitage at all. Then, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, awareness dawned. For years, he had been cultivating compassion as an abstract principle, contemplating loving kindness toward all beings in the safety of his isolated meditation. But when an actual being appeared at his door, cold and suffering and needing help, his first response was irritation and resentment. The monk stood in his doorway, and in that moment saw clearly how all his spiritual attainment had been a subtle form of self-satisfaction, a way of feeling superior and accomplished while remaining fundamentally isolated from the messy, demanding reality of other people's pain. He stepped aside and opened the door wide. "Please come in. Warm yourself by the fire. I have soup and bread. Rest as long as you need." The old woman shuffled inside, and as she did, something shifted in the hermitage. The space that had been dedicated to solitary perfection became a place of genuine meeting, of one human being caring for another without calculation or agenda. That night, as the monk sat by the fire watching the old woman sleep peacefully for the first time in who knows how long, he realized that all his years of isolated practice had brought him to this moment. Not so he could demonstrate how peaceful and unmoved he could remain, but so he could offer simple kindness without needing anything in return. When morning came and the woman prepared to leave, she bowed deeply and thanked him. The monk bowed even deeper. "Thank you," he said. "You have been my greatest teacher." After she departed, he did not immediately return to his previous routine. Instead, he walked down from the mountain, returned to the monastery in the valley, and spent the rest of his days serving in the kitchen, caring for sick monks, and greeting visitors at the gate. His former students were puzzled. They had heard of his profound attainments in solitude and could not understand why he would return to such mundane activities. But those who looked closely at his face saw something they had not seen before. A peace that did not depend on perfect conditions. A kindness that flowed naturally rather than being carefully cultivated. A presence that was fully available because it was no longer protecting anything. In a temple garden where moss-covered stone lanterns and cherry trees shed their blossoms like snow, an elderly gardener spent his days tending the grounds with infinite patience and care. He had served the temple for 50 years, arriving as a young man and staying as the decades transformed him from youth to middle age to the venerable elder he had become. His work was simple and repetitive, raking gravel into perfect patterns each morning, pruning branches to encourage proper growth, pulling weeds that threatened the harmony of carefully planned arrangements, sweeping fallen leaves, watering thirsty plants, adjusting stones that had shifted during rain. Visitors to the temple would sometimes watch him work, admiring his skill and the beauty he maintained. But few understood that, for the gardener, the work was not separate from meditation. Each stroke of the rake was a prayer. Each branch pruned was an act of devotion. Each weed pulled was a letting go. One day, a young monk approached him as he knelt beside a bed of moss, gently encouraging it to spread across bare earth. The monk had recently joined the temple and was filled with ambitious plans for his spiritual development. He had created elaborate schedules for his practice, goals for states to achieve, timelines for various attainments. "Old uncle," the young monk said, using the respectful term for elders, "I see you here every day doing the same tasks year after year. Don't you want something more? Don't you aspire to deeper realizations or higher states of consciousness? How can you be content with such simple, repetitive work?" The gardener sat back on his heels and looked up at the young monk with eyes that held an ocean of peace. He smiled and gestured around the garden. "Do you see this moss?" "Yes," the monk answered. "It grows very slowly. One cannot force it to spread faster than its nature allows. If I pull on it, trying to make it cover the ground more quickly, I will damage it. If I ignore it entirely, harsh conditions may kill it before it can establish itself. So I tend it patiently, giving it what it needs, protecting it from what might harm it, and allowing it to grow at its own pace." The gardener paused, running his weathered fingers gently over the soft green surface. "Your spiritual practice is like this moss, cannot be rushed. It grows according to its own nature, not according to your ambitious schedules and goals. Your work is simply to tend it with patience and care, day after day, without demanding that it be other than it is." "But," the young monk protested, "surely there must be more to enlightenment than just maintaining a garden. Surely there must be profound insights and transformative experiences." The gardener smiled again. "This moss has been here longer than you have been alive. Each day I tend it, and each day it is slightly different. Sometimes I notice new growth. Sometimes I see where it has died back and needs removal. Sometimes I simply appreciate its color in the morning light. After 50 years, I still discover things about this moss I never knew before." He stood slowly, his old joints creaking, and placed a gentle hand on the young monk's shoulder. "The profound insights you seek are not hidden in dramatic experiences or special states of consciousness. They are woven into the ordinary moments of patient attention. They reveal themselves when you stop seeking and simply tend what is right in front of you." The young monk returned to his room that evening, and for the first time since arriving at the temple, he did not consult his elaborate practice schedule. Instead, he simply sat on his cushion and breathed, not trying to achieve anything, not pushing toward any goal, just breathing and being present with the simple fact of being alive in this moment. Years later, he too became a gardener at the temple. And when young monks would ask him about his spiritual attainments, he would smile and show them how to rake gravel into patterns that pleased the eye, how to prune branches to encourage healthy growth, how to pull weeds without disturbing the roots of what you wish to keep. There was once a village at the foot of a great mountain, and in this village lived two brothers. The elder brother was wealthy and respected, having built a successful trading business through years of hard work and shrewd decisions. His house was large and well-appointed, his storehouses filled with grain and goods. The younger brother had chosen a different path. He owned nothing but a small hut at the edge of the village and the simple robes he wore. He spent his days meditating, helping neighbors when they needed assistance, and teaching children about kindness and awareness. The wealthy brother often felt frustrated with his younger sibling. "How can you be content with so little?" he would ask. "You could have worked with me, built wealth, secured your future. Instead, you sit and do nothing productive." The poor brother would smile. "I have everything I need. The sky overhead, the earth beneath my feet, the breath moving in and out of my body. What more could one want?" One autumn, a fire swept through the village, destroying many buildings including the wealthy brother's magnificent house and full storehouses. In a single night, decades of accumulation turned to ash and smoke. The wealthy brother stood among the ruins of his fortune, his face twisted with grief and rage. "Everything," he moaned, "everything I worked for, gone. How can I start again? I am too old to rebuild from nothing." His younger brother came and sat beside him among the ashes. The poor brother said nothing, simply remained present, breathing calmly, his face showing neither pity nor satisfaction, just quiet companionship. After a long silence, the wealthy brother spoke, his voice bitter. "You must be pleased to see me brought low. Now we are equal. I have no more than you do." The poor brother shook his head gently. "Brother, the fire has changed nothing about what truly matters. Yesterday you had a large house, today you do not. But your capacity to breathe, to see, to love, to be kind, these remain untouched by flames. Yesterday I had a small hut, and today I have the same small hut. The fire passed by it, but if it had burned, I would still have everything essential." The wealthy brother stared at his sibling, confusion and anger warring in his expression. How can you say the fire has changed nothing? I have lost my entire life's work. You have lost your possessions, the poor brother replied softly. But you never lost your life. Every morning, you woke believing your wealth made you secure and superior. Every evening, you slept anxious about protecting what you had accumulated. The fire has freed you from that burden, though you do not yet see it as freedom. For several days, the wealthy brother wrestled with despair. But gradually, something unexpected began to happen. Without wealth to protect, he stopped worrying about thieves. Without a large house to maintain, he discovered how much time he had previously spent on endless upkeep. Without goods to trade, he found himself more present with people, listening to them rather than calculating potential transactions. One morning, as dawn broke across the mountain peaks, he walked to his brother's small hut. "I am ready," he said simply. "Ready for what?" his brother asked. "To learn what you know, to discover how you found contentment without possessions." The poor brother smiled. "We will begin with breathing. That is all. Just breathing and noticing that you are alive." They sat together as the sun rose, two brothers with nothing between them but the shared miracle of consciousness, of bodies that breathe without being told to breathe, of minds that can observe their own thinking, of hearts that can open even after loss. In the months that followed, the wealthy brother rebuilt a modest house, resumed trading on a smaller scale, and lived simply. But something fundamental had shifted. He no longer measured his days by what he accumulated, but by how present he could be with whatever arose. And on his face appeared the same quiet contentment that had always lived in his brother's expression. In a monastery where silence was valued more than speech, where stillness was treasured more than activity, there lived a young nun who struggled with anger. Small things would set her off. A thoughtless comment from another nun, a change in the schedule, food that was too hot or too cold. The anger would rise like a flash flood, consuming her thoughts, tightening her chest, making her snap at those around her. She was ashamed of this tendency. She had come to the monastery specifically to cultivate peace and compassion. Yet here she was, angry more often than not, her practice seemingly making no difference in her habitual reactivity. One morning, after she had spoken harshly to a sister nun over some trivial matter, she went to her teacher with tears of frustration. "Teacher, I have been practicing meditation for 3 years now. I have studied the teachings on loving kindness. I have tried every technique you have shown me, but still the anger comes, sometimes stronger than before. Perhaps I am simply not capable of changing. Perhaps I should leave the monastery and accept that I will always be this way." The teacher, an ancient nun whose presence radiated a warmth that needed no words, simply nodded and said, "Come with me." She led the young nun to the meditation hall, then to the kitchen, then to the garden, asking at each place, "Where is the anger now?" The young nun checked inside herself. "It is not here at this moment," she admitted. "So the anger comes and goes?" the teacher asked. "Yes, it arises and then passes away." The teacher smiled. "Good. You have made an important discovery. The anger is not a permanent part of who you are. It is a visitor that comes and goes. Now let me ask you something. When the anger is present, where do you feel it?" The young nun placed her hand on her chest. "Here mostly. Feels like heat and tightness. And when you feel that heat and tightness, what happens? I try to push it away. I tell myself I should not feel this way. I am ashamed and angry at myself for being angry, which makes the whole thing worse." The teacher nodded knowingly. "This is where your suffering multiplies. The original anger is like a small flame, but then you pour fuel on it by judging yourself, by resisting what you feel, by adding shame and self-anger on top of the original anger. Soon a small flame becomes a raging fire. But what should I do instead?" the young nun asked, genuinely bewildered. "Next time anger arises," the teacher said calmly, "try this. Feel the heat in your chest without calling it bad or wrong. Notice the tightness without trying to make it go away. Breathe into the sensations just as they are. The anger is not your enemy. It is a messenger telling you that something feels threatening or unfair. You do not need to act on the anger, but you also do not need to go to war with it." The young nun returned to her daily practice, skeptical but willing to try this new approach. A few days later, Another nun made a comment that the young nun perceived as critical. Immediately, the familiar heat began rising in her chest, the tightness spreading across her shoulders. But this time, instead of fighting it or acting on it, she simply noticed it. Heat, tightness, rapid heartbeat, the strong urge to say something sharp in return. She breathed into the sensations, not trying to make them go away, simply acknowledging them. And something remarkable happened. The anger did not explode as it usually did. Instead, it simply moved through her like a wave, rising to a peak and then gradually subsiding. Within a few minutes, it was gone completely, leaving behind a sense of spaciousness and clarity she had rarely experienced. Over time, this practice transformed her relationship with anger entirely. The anger still arose occasionally, as it does for all human beings, but it no longer controlled her. It had become just another weather pattern moving through the vast sky of her awareness, no more substantial or permanent than a passing cloud. Years later, when she became a teacher herself, students would marvel at her patience and equanimity. They could not imagine her ever being angry, but she would smile and say, "Anger still visits me sometimes. I have simply learned to be a gracious host who does not mistake the guest for the house itself." At the edge of a forest where bamboo grew so thick that wind made music in its hollow stems, there lived a master calligrapher. People would travel from distant provinces to commission work from her, for her brushstrokes carried a quality that transcended mere technical skill. Each character she painted seemed alive, breathing with the essence of what it represented. One day, a young man arrived requesting that she teach him her art. "I wish to learn your technique," he said with confidence. "I will pay whatever price you ask." The master looked at him with eyes that seemed to see past surfaces into depths. "Price is not the issue," she replied. "But tell me, why do you wish to learn calligraphy?" The young man straightened proudly. "I want to create beautiful works that people will admire. I want to be known as a great calligrapher. I want my art to bring me recognition and respect." The master nodded slowly. "I see. And what do you know of the bamboo?" The young man looked puzzled. "The bamboo? It grows tall. It is hollow inside. What does this have to do with calligraphy?" "Everything," the master replied. "Come back when you know the bamboo." The young man left confused and somewhat annoyed. Know the bamboo? What kind of strange requirement was this? Nevertheless, he was determined to become her student, so he decided to observe bamboo carefully. For a week, he sat in bamboo groves, watching the plants sway in wind, noting their green color, measuring their height, counting their joints. He returned to the master and reported his observations in great detail. The master listened patiently, then asked, "And do you know the bamboo now?" The young man hesitated. "I know what it looks like. I know how it grows. Come back when you know the bamboo," the master repeated. Months passed. The young man returned again and again, each time with new information. He had learned about bamboo's growth patterns, its uses in construction and cooking, its symbolism in poetry and painting. He had interviewed botanists and studied ancient texts. Each time, the master would listen and then say gently, "Come back when you know the bamboo." Finally, after a year of this, the young man stopped researching. He stopped analyzing. He simply went to a bamboo grove and sat quietly, not trying to learn anything, not taking notes, not measuring or counting or categorizing. He sat through rain that made the bamboo glisten. He sat through wind that set it swaying and singing. He sat through snow that bent but did not break the green stems. He sat through seasons as bamboo shot up rapidly in spring, stood firm through summer heat, shed leaves in autumn, survived winter's cold. One day, as he sat in his usual spot, something shifted. He was no longer a young man observing bamboo. He was simply bamboo being bamboo, the hollowness at its core, the flexibility that allowed it to bend without breaking, the way it grew in dense groves, each stalk supporting the others, the quiet patience with which it waited for spring to send up new shoots. When he returned to the master this time, he said nothing. He simply bowed. The master looked at him and smiled. "Ah, now you know the bamboo. We can begin." She gave him brush and ink and paper. "Paint the character for bamboo," she instructed. He stood before the blank paper, brush in hand, and realized he had no technique to apply, no learned skill to employ. But when the brush touched paper, something flowed through him that was not him. The bamboo painted itself. When he finished, the master examined the character and nodded. "This is acceptable, but it is only the beginning. Now you must forget the bamboo." "Forget it?" the young man asked, bewildered. "I spent a year learning to know it." "Yes," the master replied. "You learned to become one with bamboo. Now you must learn to be one with everything so that you do not try to force anything to be itself. You simply allow it to emerge through you." The young man stayed with the master for many years, and in time, his calligraphy became known throughout the land. But he never spoke of his technique or accepted praise. When asked how he created such remarkable work, he would simply say, "I do not create anything. I just hold the brush and try not to interfere." In a valley where a river flowed clear and cold from mountain springs, there stood a small temple attended by a single monk. This monk had a peculiar practice. Every morning, regardless of weather, he would walk to the river's edge, fill a large wooden bucket with water, carry it back to the temple, and pour it over a particular stone in the courtyard. Travelers who stopped at the temple found this ritual strange. Some would ask him about it, but he would always reply with a gentle smile, "I am just watering my stone." After many years, a young scholar stopped at the temple and witnessed this daily ritual. Unable to contain his curiosity, he pressed the monk for a better explanation. "Surely you know that pouring water on a stone will not make it grow. What is the point of this useless activity?" The monk set down his bucket and sat on the temple steps, inviting the scholar to join him. "You are absolutely right," he said. "This stone will never grow larger no matter how much water I pour on it. It will never sprout leaves or produce fruit. By any reasonable measure, my daily effort is completely pointless. Then why do you do it?" the scholar demanded, frustrated by the monk's calm agreement with his criticism. "Because," the monk replied, "the stone needs nothing from me. It is already perfectly complete as a stone. When I pour water on it each morning, I am not trying to change it or improve it or make it become something other than what it is. I am practicing accepting things exactly as they are without needing them to be different." The scholar frowned. "But surely there are better ways to practice acceptance. You could meditate or study scriptures or perform useful work that actually helps someone." The monk nodded. "Yes, those are also good practices. But for me, this stone is the perfect teacher. It makes no demands. It offers no rewards. It does not praise me when I remember to water it or punish me when I forget. It simply is completely indifferent to my efforts, eternally itself." Every morning, the monk continued, "When I carry that heavy bucket from the river, my arms ache. When winter comes and the water freezes, my fingers go numb. When summer brings heat, sweat runs into my eyes. But the stone never changes, never acknowledges my effort, never becomes anything other than a stone." "And this teaches you acceptance?" the scholar asked, still skeptical. "It teaches me that most of my suffering comes from wanting things to be different than they are. I pour water on the stone, and it remains a stone. I offer kindness to a person, and they may remain angry. I practice meditation for years, and some days my mind is still chaotic. The stone reminds me that my peace cannot depend on achieving particular results or receiving acknowledgement for my efforts." The scholar sat quietly, considering this. After a long pause, he asked, "Has the stone ever changed?" The monk smiled. "Every day it changes. The water wears away tiny particles. Moss grows in its crevices. Its color shifts with the light. Seasons mark it differently. Frost in winter, heat in summer. Everything changes, always. But these changes are not caused by my pouring water. They happen according to the stone's nature and the nature of time itself. My daily ritual is not about controlling change. It is about participating in the moment without attachment to outcome." The scholar stayed at the temple for several weeks, and each morning he found himself waking early to watch the monk carry his bucket from the river and pour water over the stone. Gradually, something in him began to soften. All his life he had been trying to make things happen, to achieve results, to prove his worth through accomplishment. The monk's useless gesture revealed a different way of being in the world. On the morning of his departure, the scholar asked, "May I water the stone once before I go?" The monk handed him the bucket with a warm smile. Of course, the scholar walked to the river, filled the bucket, carried it back, and poured water slowly over the stone. He felt the weight of the water, the smooth wetness of the stone, the morning air on his skin. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was not thinking about where he needed to go or what he needed to accomplish. He was simply here, pouring water on a stone that needed nothing from him. Tears surprised him, streaming down his face. He could not have explained why he was crying. The monk sat on the temple steps, saying nothing, his presence a silent witness to the scholar's unexpected opening. When the scholar finally continued his journey, he carried something with him that no book could have taught him, the understanding that sometimes the most profound practice is the most apparently pointless one. The gesture made without hope of result, the kindness offered without expectation of reward, the effort that serves no purpose except to remind us that we are alive in this moment, participating in the great mystery that needs nothing from us but our presence. As night deepens and these stories settle into the quiet spaces of your awareness, notice that you need not remember every detail or extract some lesson from each tale. The stories have done their work simply by flowing through your attention like water through a stream bed, smoothing edges, finding hidden places, leaving everything slightly changed without force or effort. Your breath continues its patient rhythm, requiring nothing from you. Your body rests in whatever position feels natural, held by the earth that asks nothing in return. Your mind, which may have been racing when you began this journey, has perhaps found a gentler pace, a softer quality, a willingness to simply be without constantly doing. The ancient teachers who first told these stories understood that wisdom is not acquired through effort but remembered through relaxation. When we stop trying so hard to become someone else, someone better, someone more enlightened, we discover we are already whole, already complete, already home. Let these truths settle into you as you settle into rest. The peace you have touched tonight is not something you created. It was always here, waiting underneath the noise and rush, patient as stone, constant as breath, available whenever you pause long enough to notice. Sleep well, and may you wake with the gentle knowing that you are exactly where you need to be, exactly who you need to be, held by a universe that has never for one moment stopped caring for you. As the night deepens, the world slowly releases its grip. The mountains no longer ask to be climbed. The river no longer rushes to arrive anywhere. Everything becomes exactly where it is meant to be. An old monk once said that peace is not something we find. It is something that remains after we stop searching. In the quiet of the monastery, a young student asked, "Master, how do I escape suffering?" The master did not answer immediately. He poured tea into the student's cup. The tea kept rising until it overflowed onto the floor. "Stop!" the student cried. "It is already full." The master smiled gently. "So are you," he said, full of wanting life to be different. Suffering does not come from pain itself. It comes from the story we tell about pain. It comes from resistance, from the quiet sentence whispered inside the heart. This should not be happening. But life does not ask for permission. A leaf does not resist falling. A cloud does not cling to its shape. A breath does not argue before leaving the body. Yet the human mind holds tightly, as if holding could stop change. Another night, another teaching. A monk sat by the river, watching the moon's reflection tremble on the water. A traveler approached and said, "The moon is broken." The monk shook his head. "The water is moving," he replied. "The moon remains whole. So it is with the heart. When the mind is restless, truth appears shattered. When the mind is still, everything reflects clearly. Stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness without noise. Many believe silence is the absence of sound. But true silence is the absence of resistance. To sit quietly with oneself, without trying to improve, escape, or fix anything, is one of the hardest practices, and yet it is where freedom begins. In the early morning, before dawn, the monks sweep the temple grounds. Every day leaves fall again. Every day they are swept again. A visitor once asked, "Why sweep if it will never stay clean?" An old monk replied, "We do not sweep to finish. We sweep to be present." Life is like this sweeping. There is no final state of completion. There is only attention again and again. When you eat, eat. When you walk, walk. When you breathe, breathe. The mind suffers when it lives everywhere, except where the body is. Another teaching passes quietly through the hall. A student asked, "What happens after enlightenment?" The teacher answered, "Chop wood, carry water." The student frowned. "That is all." The teacher nodded. "That is everything. Awakening does not remove life. It removes illusion. Pain may still visit. Loss may still knock. But they no longer own the house. They arrive as guests and are allowed to leave. The Buddha once spoke of the two arrows. The first arrow is pain, unavoidable. The second arrow is the story we add, optional. Most people are wounded by the second arrow. They replay. They regret. They fear tomorrow while bleeding today. Freedom is learning to feel pain without turning it into identity. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the space in which they appear. Like clouds crossing the sky, thoughts pass. The sky does not follow them. At dusk, the bell rings softly, not to demand attention, but to invite it. Each sound fades naturally. It does not cling to being heard. So too, every moment of your life is already letting go. Nothing is asking you to force release, only to stop holding. The teaching of impermanence is not meant to frighten. It is meant to soften, because when you truly understand that nothing stays, you stop postponing love. You listen more fully. You forgive more quickly. You breathe more deeply. A monk once said, "Tomorrow is a thought. Yesterday is a memory. Only now is alive." And yet, how rarely we meet it. We sit in one place, while the mind runs in 10 directions. Meditation is not concentration. It is intimacy with what is. Even restlessness is allowed. Even boredom is welcomed. Even fear is given a seat. Nothing is pushed away. In this gentle allowing, the heart begins to trust. Trust does not mean believing nothing bad will happen. It means knowing you can meet what does. The tree does not fear the storm. It bends. It breaks sometimes. And still it grows again. Compassion begins with oneself. Before saving the world, learn to sit with your own breath, without judgment. Before judging others, notice how often you abandon yourself. Loving kindness is not a feeling. It is a direction. Again and again, we return to the breath, to the body, to the present, not because it is special, but because it is real. As night dissolves into early light, there is nothing left to achieve. Only this moment, quietly unfolding. And in this moment, nothing is missing.